Hello and welcome to Arglefumph Talk, the video series where I answer your questions. Yesterday I posted a long video where I talked about 21 games in the Nancy Drew series. Somebody wants me to discuss the remaining games in the series, the games which I did not discuss yesterday. So I figured I might as well complete the series. Here are the other games. Nancy Drew, Treasure in a Royal Tower. That was a pretty good game. I like Professor Hotchkiss. I think she was well done. She was a fun character, but I think she was well done in that she doesn't really show up until halfway through the game. The first half of the game, you don't really see her, but in the second half of the game, she leaves her room and you can talk to her and she's doing all sorts of things. I think that was well done, and Dexter's backstory was very well done. I really liked it. Another touch that I like with this game is that the game starts with Nancy writing a letter, like many of the Nancy Drew games, and then the letter is actually in Nancy's inventory. The letter is actually important to the game. I like that. Also, challenges I liked were the challenges in the library. Sneaking into the library was good. You had to do it twice, right? The first time you stole the key, and then the second time you had to do it backwards through an elevator shaft, which I thought was good. I didn't particularly care for the other characters, to be honest. There was Jock. He was French. I think that was basically it. The other character was the photojournalist character. Lisa. Lisa, that was her name. I don't know. There was one puzzle at the end which was really kind of long. Wasn't there like a monster slider puzzle which took me 7 minutes to solve? Yeah. It was really nice, too, that, it was a really large open area that you could explore. Some people didn't like that because you got lost and you couldn't figure out where to go. I had no problems with it. I thought that was nice. So, Treasure in a Royal Tower, pretty good game. I like it. The final scene. Nancy Drew the final scene. That was a good game. I liked it because it was structured. We have day 1, day 2, and day 3, which is good. There was the problem. There was a problem, and this problem sort of persisted with the 2 games which came after it, Secret of the Scarlet Hand and Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake. The problem being that phone conversations go on forever. So, for example, day 2, you have this humongous phone conversation with Sherman Trout, and then Eustacia and Drop-Off, I believe. I haven't played this game in years. It's amazing I can still remember these characters' names. Yeah, just the phone conversations on that one day of the game were just a bit too much. Other than that, the characters were nice. Simone was not the nicest character, but she was entertaining, and it was nice, seeing what happened to her. I liked Nicholas Falcone, Fight the Power! He was good. I like how Nancy just corrects his grammar because, being groovy is no excuse for poor grammar. That is a great line. Brady Armstrong, he's an interesting character. I think he's well developed. Apparently other people don't like him so much. At least that's what I've heard. But you know what? I like Brady. I think he was well developed. His storyline about how he wants to break free from Simone and be his own person, I thought that was good. I thought it was realistic. The other character, Joseph Hughes, is just sort of this old caretaker who just sort of hangs out all day long by the camera things. What else about this game? What else about the game? I don't know. I think it was well structured in that, you get to see new areas every single day of the game. Nancy's friend Maya was good. You don't really see Maya outside of the opening cutscene and the very end of the game, to be honest. I think that's it. Yeah. The only other thing I remember from that game is some key-making challenge, which was not important whatsoever. Well, I mean, it was important. There was also the Bee's Knees game inside... There's the Bee's Knees game inside the Royal Palladium Theater. Yeah. So, Bee's Knees and the key-making game. Those are the only challenges I remember. Nancy Drew, White Wolf of Icicle Creek. That was a pretty good game. I was on the fence whether to include it on the list of good games or bad games. I like the characters in the game. They did a good job with the characters, the way the characters look, and how the characters act. But on the other hand, the game does get into chore territory, where Nancy just does chores all day long. And that also caused a problem with the characters, because, you know, I would want to go down and want to talk to Lou, and Lou wouldn't be there. Or, you know, I would try to find Guadalupe, and I could not figure out when she was in place. That was a problem. That was a problem for me. I kept missing out on the characters just because of how time worked in that game. And I also kind of missed out on the cooking challenges. And Nancy ended up, you know, losing the game and dying because she didn't cook food for people. I think Ollie is a nice character. Even though he's sort of grumpy, you know, he's a very distinct character. He's got a very distinct personality. His daughter, Freddy, was okay. I kind of wish they had done more with Freddy, to be honest. She was not really that important. Basically, all she did was throw snowballs at Nancy, and that's basically it. She's not important beyond her snowball-throwing capabilities. Other characters. Yanni was fine. Lou Talbot, I don't really like him except for the part where he likes Planet X. That was really the only thing I remember about him. That and he likes to go snowshoeing. Which, why is that suspicious again? I haven't played the game in a while. I forget why it's super suspicious that he is a snowshoe guy, but somehow that's suspicious. And Bill Talbot, he was fine too. Guadalupe was nice, although she sort of disappeared halfway through the game. She's like the opposite of Professor Hotchkiss. Like I said, Professor Hotchkiss, she's sort of gone for the first half of the game, and then the second half she's there and you can talk to her. With Guadalupe, you can talk to her until halfway through, she gets kicked out and she sort of disappears. You can talk to her on the phone, but really it's not that important. There were a couple of phone conversations in that game. Yeah, I think that game did force you to do a lot of the phone conversations. Like, there was the huge thing you had to do with, oh man, what's his name? Tino Balducci, right. Where he had you find if Lou likes paprika. What? It was basically a complete time-wasting challenge. There are other phone conversations which I guess were kind of important, like, you know, the person who iced the steps or slashed the tires or something like that, and then there's the person who was playing video games, But other than that, you know, like, the phone conversations weren't that much. What else about the game? You know, it was a very nice environment. They did a good job with the stylized environment. I don't remember quite what happens, you know, outside. Basically, I remember a shoveling challenge. You shovel ice off of the pond, which is pointless because nobody goes to the pond. You also go ice fishing, which is fine, you know, ice fishing. And then you have the jumping challenge, which was really kind of, I don't understand that jumping challenge, jumping across the ice blocks, which was also in Creature of Kapu Cave. I did not understand how that challenge worked. It just seemed to be randomly generated. It didn't really make sense to me. The wolf was good. The wolf was good. Basically, White Wolf of Icicle Creek just stands out in my mind because of the graphics and the characters. That's really what stands out in my mind. That, and, you know, it was the first in a new graphical series. They upgraded the size of the game, so all the games before it are in, like, mandatory full screen. In this game, we have full screen, widescreen, and then partial screen, I think. So that was good, that was good. Nancy Drew, Phantom of Venice. I don't know, that was a good game, I liked it. There was Scopa. That was the part I really liked the most about the game. I think the middle third of the game, where you have Scopa and Samantha Quick. That was my favorite part of the game, really, really. I liked the middle third of the game, and Nancy was doing spy work. That was really cool. The other parts of the game, there was, like, Margarita, right? And she was supposed to be an important character, but she really did nothing. She just sort of tanned the whole time. Right. I mean, she didn't get up, she didn't do anything, she just stayed on the roof the whole time, and she forced you... Was it her or somebody else who forced you to do the bee challenge? I didn't like that challenge. That was taken from Nancy Drew, what do you call that game? Nancy Drew, the one with Iggy the Iguana, you had to get loquates for him. Legend of the Crystal Skull, that game, right. Legend of the Crystal Skull. So, Let me see, what else? Colin was an okay character. He was obsessed with Tessera, which was kind of weird. And the Tessera challenge was impossible, to be honest. The Tessera challenge that he forced you to do, every time I played the game, which granted is only like twice or 3 times, it was really, really sort of impossible for me to get the award at the end of the game for getting all of the Tessera pieces in place. I just could not get that award. Other problems. That one challenge at the very end where you had to navigate the sewers, that was really just difficult to conceptualize. It was really hard to understand what was going on there. But yeah, the middle third of the game was great. That was when the actual Phantom of Venice showed up and stole Nancy's fancy necklace, which was really good. That was good. And then Nancy went and she started spying on Antonio Fango, which was good. I liked it. And actually finding the Phantom, that was fantastic. That was good. After that, you had to kind of make a little bit of a leap with Il Dottore, figuring out who Il Dottore is. I didn't quite figure that out in my mind, to be honest. There were 2 ways you could have figured it out, and they both just went completely over my head. I didn't get it at all. Sorry. What else? Prudence Rutherford was in that game. That was nice. People don't like the singing on the ferry boats, apparently, when you're going on the gondolas. Apparently, there were comments on my video walkthrough, people like, oh my gosh, ferryman, stop singing, you can't sing. I'm like, okay, I didn't mind it. Apparently some people did. What was up with the catsuit thing, though? Nancy dancing in a catsuit? What was that? Like, how does Nancy even explain that? Who did she write the letter to in that game? Dear Dad, I just arrived here in Venice today. I started dancing on stage in a spandex catsuit in front of European strangers. I made €2. Yay! I mean, I have to imagine if Carson Drew ever heard about that, he would have taken her home immediately. That is ridiculous. Why does Nancy need money anyway? She's working for the GDIF. You know, couldn't they, like, give her an extra €50 or something, you know? She's just working for them for free, isn't she? They're not paying her at all. Well, I guess maybe they paid for her trip all the way to Venice. No, they didn't. That was Prudence Rutherford. Okay, then why couldn't they have paid Nancy? Why did Nancy have to dress in a cat suit? That was weird. It was weird, and it was also kind of difficult. It was kind of a difficult challenge because what you're supposed to do is figure out what the musical cues are according to the lights at the bottom of the screen, but that just didn't work for me. And so what I did was I did the auditory cues. I just listened to the sound effects, and that's how I figured out which things were which. Next game, Nancy drew The Haunting of Castle Malloy. So, Haunting of Castle Malloy was a okay game, you know, I liked it. It's one of those games which takes place over the course of a single night, which I think is fine. I don't really think they did enough with, what's-his-face, Kit. Kit really was not that important. There were 2 things which made him important. Well, I guess technically 3, but one is that he's developing landscape, so real estate, so he's thinking about how he could really develop the Castle Malloy territory. That's supposed to make him suspicious. That sort of fell flat. The other thing that makes him suspicious is the fact that he is still in love with Kyler, and he and Matt got in a fight over it, and he got the black eye. That was much more interesting. I really liked that. That was good. Kyler was really good too. I just love Kyler's design. She was fantastic looking. I feel kind of bad that she's not really important to the game. Which is a horrible thing to say because she's the main character besides for Nancy. But really, what does she do? She sits in her chair and reads a book the entire game. Does she help Nancy? No. Does she go out and actually look for Matt? No. She just doesn't really do much of anything. Denal was fun. Denal was more fun than a barrel of monkeys. He was a great character. And really, all he did was force Nancy to do chores for him, but for some reason, he just made it funny. He just made it work, you know? So he forced Nancy to be the barmaid, and then he forced her to play the drum, and then he forced her to collect the sheep. I don't know, there's just something refreshing about the fact that he was completely unrepentant, not sorry at all about the fact that he is just forcing Nancy to do all of his chores. Didn't he also make Nancy do chores in order to get a book to solve the crazy puzzle with the writing and the facing the 4 directions? I think he did. I think a problem people have with the game is the fact that the game doesn't really have a solid culprit, in that there's no real culprit who is purposely kidnapping Matt because the culprit is evil and doesn't like Matt or something like that. Instead, the culprit just sort of kidnapped Matt by accident. There wasn't really any evil intent behind the kidnapping of Matt, and so people feel a little bit let down. They were kind of hoping for a dramatic confrontation, but you know what? I don't mind it. I have to be honest. I have no problem with the culprit in that game. The thing which really, kind of makes me go, is the fact that Nancy has the magic jetpack, which was just crazy. Okay, I'm sorry, that jetpack was crazy. That was just such a strange thing to put in the game. I don't know. What else about the game? Really, I think that's it. It's a fine game. It's got a nice atmosphere, It's a fine game. It's definitely good. I like it. I like it. It's a good game. Nancy Drew, The Captive Curse. Okay, final game on the list. Final game for me to discuss in this video. The Captive Curse is an okay game. What I really want to do is play the game and figure out how it's structured, because it's structured somehow, I just don't know how it's structured. So, for example, or to explain, I think there are 3 appearances of the monster in that game. The monster shows up 3 times, and so the game is sort of split up into 3 different segments, 1, 2, and 3, all centering around the monster appearances. I still don't know what you do to trigger the monster's appearances, though. I'm still not sure. And that actually reminds me of Nancy Drew, Shadow at the Water's Edge, where you have those text messages from Yumi, right? You have to do something to trigger the text messages, and it's something different for every single text message, but I've never figured out what those triggers are, and so that just confused me. And you can get into the situation where you're trying to trigger it, but you don't know what you're doing wrong, what you have to do, and you just get sort of stuck wandering around doing nothing. Carl was a fun character. I liked Carl. Carl was a fun character. The Cowardly Burgermeister, I liked him. Anya was a good character. Other things were going on. Marcus was a great phone contact. I liked him. The person from Castle Corporation, Castle Corp, or whatever it was, that was sort of an extended phone conversation, which I think went on a little bit too long. There was the whole drama with Nancy and Ned. Oh my gosh, the drama with Nancy and Ned. That was fantastic. That was probably the best part of the game. It just came out of nowhere, and it was great. Another thing which I think was good was Nancy. Here's something which I think was good, but probably wasn't that good in retrospect. The whole thing about the special costume that Nancy has to wear. That's good, but we never see Nancy in the costume because we never see Nancy in the games. I think it really could have helped out if, we saw Nancy wearing the creepy costume. I actually wrote a little thing about Nancy Drew the Captive Curse for my blog. I have problems with the ending of Nancy Drew the Captive Curse. Everything else in the game is fine, but the ending just drives me crazy. So here's what happens in the ending. The culprit kidnaps Lukas and locks Lukas in the dungeon. Nancy frees Lukas, and then Lukas leaves. The door automatically locks behind him. Nancy turns a corner and she gets punched unconscious by the villain. The villain throws Nancy in a pit. Nancy manages to escape the pit using these convenient pieces of paper that she's found throughout the entire game. Then Nancy talks with the culprit starts to monologue, and then Nancy drops the culprit in the pit. That's the end of the game. So, Here are my questions. Here are my problems with that ending. Number one, why did the culprit lock Lukas in the dungeon? Lukas poses no threat to the culprit. The best thing that I can figure out is that the culprit was purposely trying to lure Nancy to the dungeons. In which case, the culprit could have just told Nancy, hey Nancy, meet me in the dungeons later. That could have worked just as fine. The culprit could have just lured Nancy to the dungeons without kidnapping Lukas. It's really strange because the culprit kidnaps Lukas and then Nancy learns through Carl about the event, right? The culprit, it's a very backwards way to get Nancy down to the dungeons. So problem number 2, why did the door automatically lock behind Lukas when he went through it? What about that? The door doesn't have a key. It's not like the culprit locked the door behind Nancy after Nancy went through the door. Yeah, that's right. Nancy was the last person through the door. So why would the door automatically lock? I don't know. And, oh boy. So why couldn't Lukas unlock the door? That's also part of problem 2. Number 3, where was the culprit when Nancy freed Lukas? You just have to guess where the culprit is. There are 2 entrances to this area, right? There's the entrance from the glass-making room, and there's the entrance from the hidden passageways. So based on where Nancy is when she gets knocked unconscious, the culprit must have entered through the hidden passageways. Well, that means the culprit couldn't have manipulated the door by the glass-making room and forced it to lock. Oh boy, okay. I mean, really, if the culprit came in through the other entrance, the culprit couldn't have manipulated the doorway on the complete opposite side. Was the culprit just there by coincidence at the exact same time Nancy freed Lukas? Was the culprit just hiding there, waiting for Nancy to free Lukas before attacking Nancy? What's up with that? Problem 4. Why does culprit knock Nancy unconscious, then throw Nancy in a pit? There is no reason for the culprit to do that. You know why? Because later on, during the monologue, the culprit says, well, Nancy, I'm here to kill you, because I'm the monster, and you're the girl in the dress. That's the culprit's plan. The culprit's plan was to kill Nancy all along, right? Why throw her in a pit? Why didn't the culprit just kill Nancy immediately? And this brings me back to the problem of why the culprit would need to kidnap Lukas. The culprit could have simply lured Nancy there and killed Nancy. There's no reason to involve Lukas. If the plan is just to kill Nancy, kill Nancy. Why all this time wasting with the locking Lukas in the dungeon and throwing Nancy in a pit? In fact, there's no point to throw Nancy in the pit because Nancy needs to die a violent death. That's how the legend works. So, if the idea is to throw Nancy in a pit and force her to starve herself to death, something like that, no, that wouldn't work. The culprit needs to kill Nancy in a bloody, violent manner in order to go along with the legends. Am I just arguing that I think the culprit should have killed Nancy right away in a bloody, violent fashion? I'm sorry, that's a horrible thing for me to say. But that's still an issue there. I don't understand why the culprit knocks Nancy unconscious, then throws her in a pit. That just doesn't seem to make much sense. Problem 5 here. Why is the culprit not surprised when Nancy escapes the pit? The culprit shows no response whatsoever. Honestly, you think the culprit would be like, what? How did you escape from this escapeless pit? Ah! Problem 6. Why is the culprit still hanging around in the dungeons wearing the monster costume? There's no reason. Nobody else is in the dungeons. Why wear the monster costume, to be honest? Nobody can get in because the only entrance is locked. Well, besides for the, the entrance and the pathways, which nobody knows about besides for the culprit and Nancy. Really, there's nothing for the culprit to do, so the culprit was just hanging around for 5 minutes waiting for Nancy to escape? Which leads me to number 7. Number 7, Nancy defeats the culprit by dropping the culprit in the pit, right? Well, why couldn't the culprit escape from the pit? because Nancy just escaped from the pit. There's clearly a way to escape from the pit. You think the culprit could have figured it out. The culprit speaks German, and the way to solve the problem is by spelling out a word in German. True, the culprit doesn't have the pieces of paper, which Nancy found, but still, you think the culprit would have at least tried to escape. Problem number 8. Why is the game called The Captive Curse? What is the curse? What does it have to do with captivity? The game doesn't really have anything to do with the curse, does it? It's about a monster. Who kidnaps people? I guess that's why they're captive. Oh, and before I finish, there's a problem number 9. Problem number 9. What is the culprit thinking? Because Nancy spends a lot of time catching the culprit, right? Nancy turns to the wall, puts the necklace in the wall, and then turns it. What is the culprit doing this entire time? The culprit is just busy monologuing and not paying attention while Nancy is doing things? Because, hey, you know what? Wait a minute. Problem 10! Wow, figured out a new problem. How did the culprit throw Nancy in the pit? The only way to open the trapdoor is by using the necklace, which Nancy has. The culprit didn't take the necklace from Nancy, so how did the culprit... I mean, the only way that could have worked is if the culprit opened the pit, you know, the culprit took the necklace from Nancy's unconscious body, opened the pit, put the necklace back on Nancy, and then threw Nancy in the pit. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Okay, that's a problem number 10. Okay, so those are 10 problems I have with the ending of Nancy Drew the Captive Curse. And that's it for this video, everybody. That is the end of my discussion of all of the Nancy Drew games in the Nancy Drew series. I've covered them all. So, thank you very much for watching Arglefumph Talk.